Welcome to the University of Houston, and thank you for attending tonight's event. My name is Dan O'Connor. I am the Dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences here at the University of Houston, where the Center for Public History is administratively housed. I just want to say a few opening remarks, and then we'll turn it over to the department chair and then to our program. But I first want to say that the magazine itself is a great example of what a public university can achieve. It ties together scholarship, student activity, community interest, and hopefully benefits the community. One thing, I'm a native Houstonian. Sometimes Houston is such a rapidly growing and changing place that we tend to lose sight of our history. So it really needs to be preserved, and they're doing tremendous work and have been for a long time at the magazine here in the Center for Public History. But as equally as important as restoring or keeping that history is to enhance the student learning. Students are involved in this at every level, and they learn skills along the way that help to make them competitive in the marketplace when they go graduate, get a job, or to a graduate or professional program. And it's a valuable contribution back to the community. So as faculty and staff are working on these projects, they're generating research products. We're a research institution, and we're evaluated on those research products. But that scholarship also allows us to celebrate the university and the city at large and recognize how our alumni are contributing to both of those events and beyond, contributing globally. So the philanthropy supporting the magazine and its projects means that by giving U of H, donors are actually giving to benefit the entire community. Tonight's program resonates with me personally, if you'll forgive for just a moment, some personal history, particularly around Phi Slama Jama. So in 1982-83 season, my best friend, my family, I'm not a basketball player. I'm not an athlete. My family would never really watch basketball. But my best friend at the time, his father was a professor here at the University of Houston, and they were big basketball fans and had season tickets. So in 82-83, probably the first basketball I ever really watched consistently was Phi Slama Jama. And so I went to most of the home games and saw Mr. Gettys and others. Obviously enjoyed it. It was tremendous activity. I went to high school. I started working with the athletics team, including basketball. And I remember the first high school basketball game, I said, what is this? Because I thought Phi Slama Jama was the norm for basketball. I had no reference point. Anyway, I learned a lot doing that. I ended up early in my, after I graduated high school, I was somewhat misinformed, made the mistake of going to a small college across the way over there from undergraduate activity. But I quickly corrected that later in life. I got my PhD from University of Houston. I ended up then taking a job here several years after that, being the department chair of the department here, and then up to dean. And now I'm introducing the basketball players, one of them at least, that I watched when I was a child and learned what basketball was. So it's interesting how personal histories will tie into community history and so on. That obviously the community history is our collective history together. But it means a lot to me personally. It was really one of those things I fondly remember about my childhood, including the nachos at the old Alphines Pavilion. So also of historical importance, though, and seriousness, is U of H's athletics role in leader in desegregating athletic programs in the South. And I think Mr. Hayes can speak to that. He was here at the front end of that. And then elevating collegiate athletics and televised popular culture in general. We not only had the game of the century in Phi Slama Jama, which really helped elevate basketball, we also had football that was very popular, including the chicken soup game versus Notre Dame, which we should have won, but that still showed on ESPN as a classic football game. So U of H was really central at the time when collegiate athletics was just starting to ramp up in terms of popularity, in particular televised popularity. So the magazine's really been capturing this meaningful history including sports history, for over 20 years. I encourage you after the presentation to go see the magazine exhibit. It's outside of Special Collections, out the doors down to the right, all the way down the hallway. And we also encourage you to see the Agents of Change exhibit that's just outside the back of the exhibit here, or the hallway here, that shows how intertwined the Center for Public History and Houston History magazine are. Just a couple more comments. One, I want to comment for a moment on the former Board of Regents chair, Welcome Wilson, who passed away very recently. In addition to other large and long-time support he'd given to the university, the magazine was actually a special project for Mr. Wilson. He supported by starting an endowment 10 years ago to further student research, training, and archival work on the topic of Houston history. And there's a section down honoring Welcome Wilson Houston History Collaborative Endowment as part of the magazine exhibit all the way down the hall. And again, we would encourage you to consider taking a look at that exhibit and perhaps helping to contribute to support that endowment so we can continue this wonderful work that you'll see here tonight. So I now introduce Dr. Nancy Beck-Young, who's professor and chair of our Department of History and a long-term member of the Center for Public History.
Thank you, Dan. And I have to confess also, well, not quite childhood, but teenage fandom for Phi Slama Jama, having watched those games early in my college years. And what y'all did was absolutely nothing like our 6-person girls basketball when I was in junior high. Yeah, I'm that old. I played 6-person ball, which was horrible. At the Center for Public History, our mission is to ignite an understanding of our diverse pasts by collaborating with and training historically minded students, practitioners, and the public through community-driven programming and scholarship. Since 1984, yes, this is our 40th anniversary year, we have created collaborative research projects with university and community partners to generate research that is local and global. As public historians, we are committed to doing history for and with the communities of which we are a part. We do this in 3 ways. First, we train graduate and undergraduate students in public history methods, values, and ethics, and prepare them for careers in the public humanities. Second, through public-facing projects like Houston History Magazine, scholars, students, and community members work together to document our rich community histories. And third, through public programming under the CPH Lecture Series, we strive to make history matter in Houston by sponsoring lectures, workshops, discussions, and seminars that speak to the value of the humanities in the professions and in the public. We are delighted to mark the latest and last issue, not the last issue of the Houston History Magazine, but the last issue that is part of the 100 Years of Stories project. The latest issue is entitled For the City. This is the if I would stick to the remarks as they were written, I wouldn't embarrass myself. This is the final issue of the magazine dedicated to the project 100 Years of Stories, documenting a century at the University of Houston. This has been a 3-year collaboration with CPH, Houston Public Media, and the MD Anderson Library, supported by a very generous gift from Carrie Shewart. Thank you, Carrie, for giving us and our students this wonderful opportunity. I'd like to close out by acknowledging somebody who is not here, and that is the former director of the Center for Public History, Dr. Monica Perales. Monica is now Associate Vice Provost of the UTSA Institute for Texan Cultures, but she led CPH for the last 5 years and oversaw the 100 Years of Stories project, of which this magazine is a part. And I'll also ad-lib from my remarks one more time, hopefully not embarrassing myself, and call out someone who is here with us, Dr. Marty Melosi, who was the inaugural director of the Center for Public History, and none of this would be here without Marty. So thank you, Marty.
So Houston History is published twice a year by the Welcome Wilson Houston History Collaborative in the Center for Public History. And this is a celebration of our most recent issue called For the City. And it commemorates the ways in which programs and people from the University of Houston have given back to the community. And so sometimes that is through education, sometimes it's politics, food, all of those are mentioned in this particular magazine. And of course, sports. I think this is the first program we've ever done on sports history, although we have certainly written about sports history many times in the magazine. Our panel today is going to discuss the illustrious eras of UH basketball history. And that's because in that magazine we have an article about Phi Slama Jama, Texas' tallest fraternity. And it was written by two of my students, Daniel Melian and Stephen Miller. But before we do that, I'm going to ask you to indulge me for a moment. I'm going to do a little tech thing here and pull up a video. Probably some of you have never been to a recent UH basketball game, and I thought it would be fun to sort of set the mood for that.
Welcome to the land where it just don't stop. Trunks pop, tops drops in the front end hop. Paint flop, screens on, that can bed in the zone. Yeah, it's on, ride on, ballin' at my home. Texas place don't hate, showing up in the state. Can't wait, get it straight while the front end break. Ain't the cost, be the boss, looking good when I'm floss. Sunshine, let it down, turn it up and climb. Roll around, hit your block, trunk going on now. Let it up, let it pop, light up the whole block. Southside, how we hold on a gangster stroll. Music hitting so hard, knocking outside mode. Hit the highway, cruise control, gon' let it roll. Roll up a drink, fired up and show the windows closed. On, high side, going up the south side. Keep it in this day, I'm coming down, breaking the slave. Songs keep popping, tops keep dropping down.
Okay, you ready? All right, I have one question. Whose house? All right. Okay. That better? Our panelists today are perfect examples of people who have contributed to the city of Houston and the university, which is for the city. And so two of them played during the Cougars' most historic eras of basketball, and they have all been involved in sports broadcasting in one way or another. So I'll start with our introductions. Bill Worrell is a Houston native and a graduate of Lamar High School. A 1969 graduate of UH, he played baseball and went to the College World Series in his senior year. Bill began his broadcast career at KUHF while he was still a student and became a KPRC Channel 2 news reporter in 1970. And that was before they named him the sports director. He is an award-winning sports announcer. He called games for the Houston Astros for 20 years and for the Houston Rockets from 1980 to 2021, so that's 41 years. I can do math. As well as other major sporting events like the Super Bowl and the Kentucky Derby. He is a UH Distinguished Alumnus. He was inducted to the UH Hall of Honor in 2016, and I also have to give Bill credit for arranging for all of our panelists to be here this evening, so thank you very much for that. Elvin Hayes. I guess you know he's the Big E, right? Is from Rayville, Louisiana, and along with Don Chaney, he desegregated UH basketball during the 63-64 season. He played in the 1968 Game of the Century, which was in the Astrodome, and that was the first nationally televised college basketball game ever. And in that game, UH played UCLA, which was led by a guy named Lou Alcindor, who some of you may know better as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And in that game, the University of Houston won, and Elvin Hayes scored 39 points and got 15 rebounds. So pretty heavy duty. His UH records include career field goals, points per game, and I'm going to add that was before the three-pointer. So he still holds all those records, and rebounds. A member of the UH Hall of Honor, he had his number 44 retired in 2022. He was drafted first overall by the then San Diego Rockets in 1968 and played 16 years in the NBA, and that included 2 stints here in Houston. He won a championship with the Washington Bullets and is a member of the NBA Hall of Fame. And today you can hear him as an analyst for Cougar basketball home games on the radio, 950, in case you didn't know what channel. Reid Gettys also is from Houston. He is a graduate of Memorial High School and a member of the 5 Slama Jama teams from 1981 to 1985. He still holds UH records for assists in a single game, assists in a single season, and career total assists. Now, to give you some perspective on what that means, it means he was the guy feeding the ball to Akeem Olajuwon, Clyde Drexler, and Michael Young. So he played a very, very important role with the Phi Slama Jama team. Also, as a freshman, I should point out that he made 10 consecutive free throws in a game that helped UH advance to the Final Four that year. Although drafted by the NBA, he played 1 season for the Albany Patroons in the Continental Basketball Association and won a championship with them in 1988. He also coached briefly at the University of Houston and was the head coach at the Woodlands Christian School when it won a state championship. He is an attorney, and he serves as a college basketball analyst for ESPN. Okay, introduction. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a couple of questions for each of our panelists, and then we're going to let them engage in the conversation about some of their favorite memories here at the University of Houston, and then we'll open it up to Q&A from the audience. Okay? So, Elvin, I'd like to start with you since you played first. And then I want to ask you a little bit about what it was like coming here to Houston, which was much bigger than the town where you grew up, and also what it was like desegregating UH athletics. Don Chaney, right? Don Chaney. Were there any things that Coach Lewis did to try and help make that transition easier for you and perhaps for Don?
Well, I know for me, I had Don really had a pretty good time of, getting us to make a decision. But
And I think someone that was very close to you might be here this evening, too. I thought maybe we'd introduce your roommate. Isn't that right? This is Mr. Howie Lorch, who is Elvin's roommate.
Howie
So-
was the manager of the team. Elvin locked him out of his room about 12 times that first semester.
I didn't know that story.
They were really dear friends. Yeah, we threw all your stuff out in the hallway and everybody had to clean it up. But I think we need to a clear picture. I came from a segregated high school in Houston. It was all white. And I really had enough of that kind of nothing. A lot of black people, myself. And I would come over to U of H because Guy Lewis let high school kids practice in the old gym. And he had a lot of young black high school students who we'd never played against, but we knew if we could play with them, we were pretty good. So we would sneak over there and play. Now this was in 1961. 62. So when I got to school, I was 2 years ahead. And I think it's important to note that we had recruited Philip Hoffman to be our first Dr. Philip Hoffman came from Ohio State, and with the determination to integrate the University of Houston. Guy Lewis was very happy because he had been after the University of Houston to do that. He had several players at Yates High School that he wanted to recruit in 61 and 62. They ended up going elsewhere. One went to Texas Texas Western, and they won a national championship against Kentucky, which had an all-white team. So Dr. Hoffman and Harry Fout decided to integrate the university, and Bill Yeoman was here, and he came because he wanted to. Bill Yeoman came in 62, and he wanted to recruit. He came from Michigan State, and he recruited the Golden Triangle in Texas and got a lot of great football players. So they said they would stay for a couple of more years, and if we didn't integrate, they were gone. So Dr. Hoffman did it, and he did it first. They recruited Warren McVeigh in football in the fall of 1964 when they passed the civil rights legislation, and this kind of sped everything up. And then they brought in Don and Elvin. Now, Dr. Hoffman did an interesting thing, and I wanted to throw this in just to give everybody perspective of what we're talking about. A lot of campuses had problems integrating because of people who are not quite educated enough to realize that that's everybody's human beings, and this is where we should go forward. But it can't always be that way. So he didn't want any campus disruptions, so he went to Channel 2, Channel 11, Channel 13, the only TV stations in town. He went to the Chronicle, the Post, and the Houston Press. He got them all in one room. He told them what he wanted to do. He wanted to bring in Elvin and Don, but he was also bringing in about 15 more black students who were not athletes. And he didn't want to have any disruption on campus, so could they hold off the first couple of weeks on reporting that the U of H had integrated? They all agreed. Now, you couldn't do that nowadays. I mean, you couldn't do that. So for 2 weeks, it was not announced that we had integrated the U of H, and then finally, about the third week, Dr. Hoffman announced it, and everybody went, oh, well, we can't even protest. You know? But I mean, that's how he was able to make it, you know, pretty easy. And this guy right here, I'm telling you, he's my all-time hero and always will be, because no matter what he tells you about not going, that can be a lonely, lonely place when there are very few black students with white students. Because I remember Don Chaney telling me when he came home one day from school and Guy Lewis was in his living room and he thought he'd done something bad. He never had a white person in his house before. So Guy was the first one to break the ice, and he and Yeoman, and he was really courageous. And that's all I can say to you folks, that if you're the only one somewhere of one color or one nationality, one religion, then it can be uncomfortable. But this guy made it. He also had a little bit of a stutter when he came out of high school. Do you remember that? The first time I had my little radio show across campus, and I did an interview with you, and I asked you a question, and you didn't say anything. You kind of slow getting into it, and then I realized, uh-oh. He majored in speech so that he could cure that problem, because he knew he was going to play in the NBA. And now, after his, junior year, you couldn't shut him up. So, yeah. But these are the things that they had to endure and play through, and yet go into places like Fog Allen. We've had to play Kansas to get to the Final Four, remember that? And their building. And they had a great team that year, and you beat them by 16 points. And in their building to go to the Final Four. And that's when I knew what a great team you had, because that was just you remember that game? They had JoJo White.
He was a football player, but then he played basketball, and boy, they had a team.
Yeah. This is the team that put us on the map. But I always wondered, that Astrodome game, that turned basketball around completely. That was the first nationally televised game, 53,000 people in the Astrodome.
Yeah.
Remember, and they didn't know where to put the court because they'd never done it before, so they put it out where second base would be for the Astros games.
That's true. And plus, the thing is that a lot of people don't realize was that game was played on UCLA's home court.
That's right.
They played on that court at
Pauley Pavilion.
Mm-hmm. But they were really had a lot of problems with it, and they really had a lot of problems coming down here because they said, I remember the night before I went over to the hotel they were staying over by, and they were saying, oh, let's beat these farmers and get on back home to LA. And it was one of those kind of things that, you just kind of laugh and say, oh, okay, you guys are all right. But
So let me jump in a second on that. So I'm a native Houstonian, born and raised, and I've never shared this with Elvin, but he was my hero growing up too, because my dad admired him so much. My dad was a 4-year All-American football player at Texas Tech. And so as we were growing up, he was talking about what Don Chaney and what Elvin Hayes were doing out at the University of Houston, integrating the school, not just a basketball program, not just an athletic program, but a school in an area of the country. And my dad admired him so much. And when I came to U of H, I wanted to take an exception with what you said, that Elvin's number 44 is hanging in the rafters. It's our number 44. Yeah. So I wanted to wear number 44 because of that. And even though the jersey, I don't think it was retired at the time. So nobody said I couldn't wear it. So, the big joke around our house is I have 2 boys, and while they were growing up, I'd bring them out to Hallfines, and I'd say, see that jersey up there? And that worked until one of them turned about 10 and learned how to read. Dad, why does it say Hayes on the back of your jersey? I don't know. It's a typo. But as a native Houstonian, and it's amazing, I've never heard Elvin tell these stories, and I've heard Don share some, and Otis Birdsong share a lot about what he's been through. But the amount of pride that should give all of us, you know, the visionary that Coach Lewis was at the forefront of this, and Mr. Falk and Bill Yeoman, and the pride that we ought to take. It's really everything that our school stands for, right? I mean, it's everything that we represent and everything that we believe in the game of the century. I was at that game. I was a 5-year-old, and it was sitting in the middle of the Astrodome, and I was in one of those seats around the court. And so after that game, my dad, you know, the famous front page article, I can't remember whether it's the Post or the Chronicle, of Elvin, you know, winning the tip against Lou Alcindor. I had that framed, and I've had it from the time I was 5 years old. It went with me. It was in my bedroom. I grew up looking at it and reading the article. It came with me to U of H. It was over in the quad. It was in the towers. And I still have it in our game room at home. And so the pride that we took, you know, as young kids growing up and watching this program and watching what Elvin and Don did was just almost, you know, there's a significant drop off here when we talk about credentials and stature. But I'm honored to have been a part of it.
So how did you were part of Phi Slama Jama, a team that relied heavily on the dunk, which, by the way, had been outlawed by the NCAA.
Because they couldn't replace the rims, because they were afraid they were going to bend the rims, and they couldn't replace them, and then they invented the snap down rims and
Right.
started allowing it.
Come back in I don't know,
Yeah. Yeah.
opportunities for that in the 1970s. And then you came here in the early 1980s. What was it like being on a team that relied heavily on the dunk, and how did you find your role as the assist leader?
Yeah. Don, yeah. Bill said, I don't remember a lot about you. And I said, just remember how athletic I was and how much I dunked. And so I was, it's interesting because I was recruited. So 2 stories. So I was recruited as a shooter. At Memorial, we were the classic all-white school, pass, 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 shoot. Pass, 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 shoot. And I was recruited as a shooter and dreamed about going to Texas Tech and playing where my dad played. And we were playing a playoff game in Hallfines Pavilion, and I didn't have any college offers. And all I wanted was for Gerald Myers at Texas Tech to offer me a scholarship. He's sitting down on the courtside next to Coach Lewis watching this game. And after the game, you know, Coach Myers wants to meet with you. I'm like, oh, yeah. You know, and I went out and I met with him, and he knew my dad from Texas Tech. And he said, look, you know, I respect your dad so much, but you're not good enough to play for us. And it was crushing. But at the same time, I appreciated the honesty so much. And then my high school coach goes, Coach Lewis is in the next room. He wants to talk to you. I was like, really? Why? And, you know, I walked in and he said, you know, Gerald and I were talking to Coach Myers, said, you know, Gerald doesn't think you can play for him, but you can play for me. And I went, wow. And so I had 2 offers. I joked coming out of high school. I could play basketball at the University of Houston or with the Sigma Chi's at University of Texas. Those were my 2 choices. I mean, not junior college, not Sam Houston, not even Rice, for crying out loud. So I was recruited as a shooter. And it's interesting because about 5-6 games into our season, I wasn't playing at all. And I was stupid enough to think I should have been, or competitive enough to think I should have been. And I wasn't playing, and I wasn't playing, and I wasn't playing. And, you know, the beauty of going to school at U of H and being from Houston, go out to with my parents for dinner after one of the games, and I'm just about to explode. And my dad, just incredibly wise man, he said, let me ask you a question. He said, how are you shooting in practice? I said, Dad, I'm shooting great. I said, it's the best I've ever shot in my life. I am absolutely shooting the best I've ever shot. He got kind of quiet. He goes, have you ever thought that maybe that's not what he's looking for? And I said, no, sir, I was recruited as a shooter. And he's like, well, how's that turning out for you? And I said, well, not very well. He said, let me ask you a question, excuse me. Is there anything on the basketball court that nobody else is doing? And I thought about it and I went, yeah, nobody passes. He goes, why don't you try that? Why don't you see if that'll get you on the floor? And man, talk about a life lesson. You know, that you identify a vacuum and fill the vacuum and identify a need and fill that need. So I left dinner that night determined to become the best passer in the history of Houston basketball.
That's terrific.
Let me tell you one other story because you asked. So my first practice, so I'm coming from Memorial, right? Pass. And I'm walking out there and man, here's Clyde Drexler and Akeem Olajuwon and Mike Young and Larry Mishaw. And at that time, Rob Williams, those of you that remember Rob, was Allen Iverson before Allen Iverson. And I'm walking out there going, oh my gosh, what am I doing here? I'm thinking, oh man. So we start practice, and I've never dunked in my life. Never dunked once in my life. And in the middle of the first practice, I saw the rim, and a little voice in my head said, dunk it. So I jumped up, and I tried to dunk it, and I stuck the ball on the front of the rim, and my feet went flying out, and I landed in the middle of the floor, and I'm sprawled out, and all the fellas are laughing at me like, man, who is this white guy? I'm sprawled out on the floor. And I'm thinking, that was the worst moment of my life. And it wasn't the worst moment, because the worst moment was what Elvin just talked about, when Coach Lewis said, I want to see you in my office after practice. I thought, man, there goes my scholarship. I've been here one day, and I'm going to lose my scholarship. Sat down, and Coach Lewis, he goes, what was all that crap? What were you doing out there? And I said, I'm just playing basketball, Coach. And he's like, is that how you played in high school? Were you super athletic and dribbling between your legs and dunking? And I thought for a second, I could lie to him. He goes, I saw you play. And I said, no, sir, that's not how I play. And he goes, have you ever dunked in your life? And I said, no, sir, not one time. And I said, I hadn't even gotten close, really. He said, so let me ask you a question. If I watched you play and I gave you a scholarship based upon what you do, why would you come out here and try to change and become what everybody else does? He said, why don't you just trust me? Why don't you trust me that I can take your skill set and I can blend it with Akeem and with Clyde and Mike Young? And that literally changed my life. That somebody would believe in me that much. And it was the opposite, right? At that time, it wasn't Coach Lewis going and recruiting a black kid out of Louisiana. It was going to Memorial and recruiting a white kid out of Memorial, right? I didn't fit in. And he said, hey, why don't you just trust me? And man, that conversation changed my life.
Plus you were 90% free throw shooter.
Well, at one time.
And Coach would put you in the games in the final 2 or 3 minutes. You would get the important assist. They'd always foul you because you had the ball.
Because I was scared.
You always made the free throws.
Yeah. But it's a testament. You know, Coach Lewis was the first one, you know, to really the first one in this part of the country to integrate our school and our athletic program. He was the first one to have the idea of let's play a college basketball game and put it on national TV. He was the first person to say let's put it in a stadium and fill it up, right? And Roy Hallfines at the time said, you know, Coach Lewis, nobody will be able to see the game. And Coach Lewis pulled out a baseball and pulled out a basketball. And he said, isn't this the ball you usually play with? And Roy Hallfines was like, yeah. And he was so ahead of his time always. And I appreciated the fact that that he could go pick a kid out of Memorial and blend what I could do in with all the things that I couldn't do.
So, Bill and Elvin, do you have some other memories of Coach Lewis that you want to share?
Well, I was going to, is it on? Okay. I was going to follow up on what you were talking about, and the fact that Coach Lewis was able to adapt. Before he got Don and Elvin, he had the white kids who were different types of players. And one of them is with us today, and I'd like to recognize Bernie Kapner, who played on Guy's first team. And Bernie, I think you understand what I'm talking about. He would slow the game down. You had Don Boldebuck, who was the first 7-footer at the U of H, big white guy, about 7 foot, almost 7.5. And you guys would slow it down, run a very patterned offense, and beat people. And then he would, that's the way he won. And then when he was able to recruit black players, he went out and got guys like Elvin and Don, and then he went and got those great Slama Jama guys, and they were up and down the court so fast you couldn't count them. I mean, they went from averaging, what, Bernie, 50 points a game at the most, to averaging 100 points a game. So that's why he's in the Hall of Fame.
That's right.
He took slow teams and won, and he took the black teams and speeded it up. So I tell you, Guy Lewis is the greatest. That's why he's in the Hall of Fame. And we're lucky. You think about that coaching staff we had back then. We had Guy Lewis, Bill Yeoman, who's in the Hall of Fame,
yeah.
College Football Hall of Fame.
Dave Williams.
Yeah, Dave Williams, who won 16 national championships.
Yeah.
And Levette Hill, who coached me in baseball, who took us to the College World Series in 1967. So we really hit the map. That's 67, 68 years, by the way. We went to College World Series. Your team finished with only 2 losses in the Final Four. You lost to UCLA. And let's see, our baseball, basketball, and our football team only lost 1 game that year.
Wow.
So we were right on top of the world in 67, 68.
So what do you all remember about watching the Slama Jama teams? Like, Reid talked about watching you play, Elvin.
Yeah.
What? I'm sure you were also watching, well, you were playing.
He's thinking, why is that guy wearing number 44?
Yeah, but it's one of those things that I remember when they really got to the finals and they were playing North Carolina State. And, and I was in the locker room telling everybody, oh, U of H is going to win, U of H is going to win. It's going to be, all us. And they go out and
Didn't.
But it's one of those things that I think that whenever you played at a place, you always, with all the guys, you're always, arguing about, hey, who's the best, who's going to win, and all of that. And we did that. And so I was really proud of the Cougars. I was really proud of the way they played. I really was proud of the way they carried themselves. It was just really a great year for them.
Yeah, that was those teams. I was doing the PA for your teams in places that we played, and then Jim Nance came along and was doing y'all's games.
Yeah.
So we laugh and joke. We have more fun talking about my teams, which is Elvin and Don, and his teams,
Yeah.
which were you guys.
Weren't you doing our games on HSE and
Yeah,
all?
we were doing a lot of your games
Yeah.
on HSE, and that was before they finally woke up and we didn't have ESPN then,
Yeah.
like we do now. So the Cougars were on TV a lot.
So native Houstonian, I grew up idolizing Bill Worrell also. And then when I got it from the Astros to the Rockets, and one of I had 2 career goals in my broadcasting. One of them is to do a game with Nance. That didn't get to happen. But the other one was to get to do a game with Bill Worrell. And Calvin Murphy was in a contract dispute over Thanksgiving. I don't know anything about the NBA game. And they called me on Wednesday night as they were leaving and said, hey, will you go with the Rockets on a 2-game road trip and do a game? And I was like, with Bill? They were like, yeah. I said, I'm in. And so absolutely a career dream come true to get to do 2 games with Bill Worrell.
Very kind, but you did a hell of a job. No, he did. I told Murphy, you better pick it up.
Or give me 10%.
You don't know Calvin as well as I do. He ain't giving up any money.
No fancy jackets. But I remember I was on the floor doing the open, and Bill was over at the table in the headset, and I'm doing an open, and I'm trying to be really smart and insightful, and Barkley was on that team. And in the middle of a live shot, he runs up and grabs my face and kisses me on the cheek. And I was like, man, Bill, back to you. Like, Charles Barkley just kissed me on national TV.
There's nothing to brag about.
No. I'm not sure how I feel about it still.
Y'all are all in broadcasting. I'm curious to know, what did you think when the Thomas Ball from the Post came up with that name, Five Slama Jama?
That was brilliant. Tommy was a heck of a reporter.
Yeah.
He went from here to LA, and I think he still writes a little bit out there for the LA Times. But interesting enough, too, John Hollis gave this guy the moniker of the Big E. And I thought, well, that's a good
John
play
Hollis.
on words. And John Hollis worked for the Houston Post, but John, in World War II, was stationed on the Enterprise. And they called the Enterprise the Big E.
Oh,
And so
wow.
when John came back, he was covering the Cougars, and he said, that's the Big E.
That's great. I've never
those are
heard
the 2
that.
reporters that gave us
Yeah.
the Big E and Phi Slama Jama.
I never heard that story.
Yeah.
I hadn't either.
No.
Well, I'm the only one here old enough to remember. And by the way, Elvin and I wanted to complain a little bit about that 2-hour walk across campus coming.
You need a shuttle.
We're too old to be walking that far.
I'll send you the administrator.
Yeah, that won't do any good.
I want to ask you each a question, kind of bridging the past to the present. And Elvin, I'm going to start with you again. Now you go to the games and you're calling the games, and you got a great team to watch. But what does it feel like for you to go and you see your name and Howie Lorch's name down there on the court?
Well, I guess that's a big noise, but it's one of those things that when you first come to a place, the university was, we were like distant, we were really distant. And I remember the year before we got here, my time, and he had said, he had said, hey, there won't be a black ever step foot on this campus. And, the next year we were.
Wow.
And so it was one of those things that you had to really kind of go through. And there was a lot of things that we went through, but look at the school today, and I look at all the students coming in today, you know, in the student section, sitting there, and it's really amazing how all the students kind of get together and together. But it's one of those deals that I really like what I see over here now. And like over the years that I've seen the way it's grown and everything. So I think it's a really good situation.
They called Hofheinz Pavilion for many years the building that Elvin built. Because Guy Lewis, here's another Lewis story too. I don't know if you guys remember this or not. We had plans for a new arena. And he would carry him on all his recruiting trips. He was going to show these.
This is what we're going to build?
Did he show you? Yeah. This is going to be the new arena you're going to be playing in. And don't worry about that 2,000-seat arena over there at Delmar Fieldhouse and the one over here on campus. Seated about 1,000 people at Jefferson Stadium. He said, this new arena is right around the corner. It's going to happen. Did you ever play in the new arena?
No, every year he tells me, he said, Elvin, he said, next year, arena,
Next year.
it's going to be ready. Well, junior year. Well, when you become a junior, you're going to play in that new arena. And oh, really? When I was senior, he said, Elvin, come January, you're going to play in that arena. And only time I came back a year after I graduated, and Georgia was out on the court playing in that arena, and I never played in that arena. It was really wild.
Yeah, that was the building you got built.
Yep.
That was just for you, and we had some great memories in there. And I remember when we closed the arena, Kelvin Sampson was being recruited. We were recruiting him to be the coach here. And we came in the back door of Hofheinz Pavilion, and this rat, about the size of a small possum, ran across the floor. And I told Kelvin, I said, "Don't worry, that's one of our season ticket holders." We had lied a little bit to Kelvin and told him, we had this new arena coming.
Next year.
We had this new practice facility and all of this stuff, and he didn't have any of that when he got out here. So then we promised him the same thing that you got promised. And by the way, we did become the #1 team in the nation today. 7 weeks, we were #1 last year, and I hope it can last longer than 7 weeks this year. But we asked Kelvin about that. He said, I only want to be #1 after the last game.
That's right, the last one.
Yeah, so.
So do you have any favorite broadcast memories you want to share?
Oh, gosh. I used to practice calling basketball and football games, and they wouldn't let us in the press box because we really didn't have one back then. So I would sit on the last row of the stands, and I would tape all of my notes down on this row in front of me. Well, the first game, a little gust of wind came up, everything was gone.
Oh.
So I figured out the fans didn't know what names were out there on the field anyway, so I just started picking out names until I could find my notes, and that was a rookie mistake right off the bat. But KUHT and KUHF were great resources for me. Getting the training I needed to get to Channel 2, and I was very fortunate to be hired. I would do interviews for Channel 2 during football season because Bill Ennis, who was a sports director at the time, didn't have the time to get out there and do the interviews himself. So for 2 years on Channel 2, that was my hand holding the microphone. And then I got to do the Bill Yeoman show for 4 or 5 years in the glory years, and that really helped me propel me into other things. And so I had nothing but love for this university, because everything I wanted to do, to accomplish here at the university, not so much academically, but I wasn't the world's greatest student, but I was able to hang in there until I finally got that diploma. And so it's given me so much, and I just look back and getting to know this guy and Don Chaney, getting to know that guy right there who's really one of my favorite people all around. And I look out again, let me be remiss if, Bo, stand up. Bo Smith is here. And Bo was, he was a former board of regent here at the University of Houston, and a dear friend of mine when I went to school out here. Bo was the president of Sigma Nu and a lot of the government stuff, and I was at Sigma Chi. And I think he helped me get through a couple of finals or whatever to keep me eligible. And Jimmy Dish is a good friend of mine who's here. Jimmy, where are you? Yeah, stand up, Jimmy. Jimmy was on a lot of our teams and in our Sigma Chi days when we were there, and he was one of my pledges and pledge trainer, and it's so good to see him. We've remained friends for a long time. So I see so many familiar faces out here of people that I went to school with. But this is such a great university, and I wanted to talk about Philip Hoffman, and I also want to remember another great president, Renew Couture, who came to us about 15 years ago, and the greatness that we are having now, what she has done with the campus, and what she has done, and you know, when you have great athletic teams, like the University of Houston is #1 in the nation in basketball. That's on every television in every house, all day long, every day, 24 hours a day. So that's free advertising. And historically, every time we've had these great teams, we also do a great job of recruiting students, not just athletes, but students. Our numbers always go up because people want to go with a winner, and that's just the way life is. And we've got it going right now.
Yep. So what you were talking about today's team and today's program, and I was discussing it with a couple of professors when I came in. I have said it on the air during some games, and immediately my phone lights up from all my old buddies, and my comment was that as great as Elvin's teams were, specifically for 2 years, as great as our teams were for 3 years, this is the golden era of Houston basketball right now. What Kelvin Sampson has done is they may not have hit the peaks that we hit for 2 or 3 years. What he has sustained and what he has built as a program, and the kind of young men that are representing all of us, you want to talk about kids that we can be proud of, and high character, high integrity. I'm not sure there's ever been a kid that's come through here that I think more of than Jamal Shed, and what he represents. But what he represents, not set aside how great of a player he is, but what he represents, and it represents us, and it's how I want to be represented. And when people see University of Houston, I want them to see Jawan Roberts, and I want them to see Emmanuel Sharp, and I want them to see L.J. Cryer. And these kids, they are so good, and it's never been a time that it's been easier to pull for a basketball team than these kids. But I'm going to tell you, and I'll tell anybody who asks me, this is the golden era. And if you're not on the bandwagon, come on, hop on board. You won't be able to get tickets. That's the bad news. But whatever arenas they go play in a couple of weeks, there'll be some tickets there. You ought to jump on board.
Thank you.
I want to open it up now to questions from the audience, because I feel like you probably have some things you'd like to ask. So we'll pass around the microphone for that.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, gentlemen, for the years. Wonderful. I'm sure I speak for everybody here. I'd like to ask you specifically, is there anything in your career that you regret doing or regret not doing in your career from U of H all the way to the present?
Are you asking all three?
All three.
Okay.
Well, I achieved, everything I came into the league I wanted to achieve and I wanted to accomplish. I had an opportunity to do that leaving U of H. I remember when I left home, there was a guy saying, "You'll never be All-American, you'll never be this, you'll never be that." I was All-American, here, yeah. And then leaving college, went on, I was Hall of Fame, I was NBA 50 greatest, I was NBA 75 greatest. So I had the opportunity to achieve a lot of the goals that were set for me. And so I'm really happy about all of that.
Let me add too that in 16 years in the NBA, you know how many games he missed? 9.
Is that
9
right?
games.
That's
You got
unbelievable.
guys that have missed 19 already this season.
Yeah. Wow.
Played every minute of every game. Unbelievable.
For me, so many people focus on the loss against NC State. It's interesting because I was talking, I won't say his name, but I was talking to one of my old teammates the other day, and he was talking about, he said, golly, our athletic careers were so tragic, and he said something else, and he said tragic. I was like, yo, wait, what are you talking about? Tragic? Oh my gosh, we were blessed to do something that maybe 2 UCLA teams ever did and make it to 3 Final Fours and 2 national championships. And for me, who was clearly an outlier as far as talent level, the fact that I got to be a part of that. To answer your question, any regrets? Not a one. Not a single regret. I have very few days. I got in an Uber yesterday. And a guy, we started driving down the road, goes, "Hey, I hope you don't mind. I saw your name. Are you tired of talking about Slama Jama?" And I'm like, never. My entire life, it has opened doors for me, and it helped get me into law school because my academics didn't get me into law school. It has opened doors for me my entire life. I could not be more proud to be a double degree, University of Houston, native Houstonian. And I don't have a regret in the world.
I have certainly no regrets. I'm still here and still kicking. And he's still here and still kicking. You got me.
I'm not kicking.
This has been a wonderful life.
Yeah.
And a lot of what we started here,
Yeah.
we based our whole life on. You can, we all have regrets, but it's too late to worry about them. And I've gotten this far by a century.
Absolutely. We have time for one quick story. So I'm trying a case in South Texas about 6 years ago. And we're down there. It's a 2-week trial. I'm putting on the case. The judge hates me. He hates ExxonMobil. He thinks we should lose. And I'm just getting killed in front of this judge. And so this is after the case has been pending for 2 years. We're trying the case. We've been in trial for about 6 days. I'm putting on my case in chief. So this is about day, 8 or 9 of trial. And right before lunch, he said, "Jury, you're dismissed. Counsel, would y'all stick here? I need to talk to you about something." So I'm thinking, oh, great, I'm going to get killed again. And so jury leaves, and he looks at me, and he goes, "Why stall?" in South Texas in the middle of the trial. This is 30 years after it. And I looked at him and I said, Judge, I'm putting on witnesses as fast as I can. I've cut witnesses. I've cut my exhibits in half. I'm not stalling. And as if we had been talking about it for a week, he goes, no, why stall? And I looked at him, I said, NC State? He goes, yeah. Like, what else would we be talking about? And so my answer to that is the worst coaching job I've ever seen in my life was Joe B. Hall, who played against Georgetown, and they lost by 30, and he just kept doing the same thing. And so my answer to that is that game was one of the best coach games I ever saw Coach Lewis coach, because he had the courage to try something different. He had the guts to do it, and he tried to put us in a position to win. Now, it didn't work, and he was forever remembered because it didn't work. But the worst coaching you could have done was to not try something. But 30 years later in South Texas in the middle of a trial. Is that crazy? That's crazy. What's that? It was Hinojosa. Richard Hinojosa. It's exactly what a UT guy. Yeah.
Let me tell you another thing, too, that you didn't bring out. North Carolina State had 4 players that ended up playing 5 or 6 years or more in the pro.
Yeah.
So they weren't slouches by any means, and in fact, they shouldn't even have been in the tournament.
No, yeah.
They were getting beat at the end of the first 4 games that played in the tournament. And they came back and won them all. It was a miracle.
Yeah.
And then Jim Valvano was running around trying to hug somebody.
So at ESPN, when they did the 30 for 30 on NC State, they called my house. I wasn't in, and my wife takes the call, and the guy explains, 30 for 30, are you familiar with it? She goes, yeah, I went to high school, Marcus Dupree. I love the one y'all just did. He said, well, yeah, I'm producing this, and we're going to do one on NC State, and we'd like to talk to Reid. She goes, I don't know that he's going to be interested in talking to you about that one. But they did a nice one on us. So.
Jim Valvano said, by the way, his family said later at his funeral that he realized now how they were able to beat Phi Slama Jama.
How's that?
He said, because the Lord wanted me for something.
Yeah. Well,
He gave me the championship.
Well, not to diminish that, but hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars have been raised in Jim Valvano's name for cancer research because they won that game. I firmly believe that.
I'd like to clarify something.
Ladies first.
What's your name again? The one in a red shirt? Oh.
You can just say Big E.
Huh?
Big E.
Oh. Mr. Hayes, I have a question for Mr. Hayes. After UH was starting to become desegregated, was the effects of desegregation still there until like the early 1970s?
Well, yeah, it was, but it was a situation where, you kind of, by then I was in pro, and I was living in San Diego, and so it was one of those things, you don't think a lot of that having an effect on your life. So I guess, though something is there, yet it's not affecting you as much as it was later, that was earlier in your life.
Yeah, Howard?
I think it's important that you all understand where Elvin came from, because I've been to Rayville. In fact, Elvin can tell you his freshman year, right after those 2 Jewish kids and the African American were killed in Mississippi, about 2 weeks later, we went over to myself and Reno Lifshitz from the Bronx, 2 Jewish kids from New York, as a matter of fact, went over to Elvin's house for Thanksgiving. And we came from Monroe to Rayville. And on the way over, Elvin pointed out on the right the smoldering Ku Klux Klan cross. That's the kind of environment that Elvin came from and what he had to live with. And about 5 miles before we got to Rayville, Elvin and I had a little 61 Plymouth Valiant. And Elvin, of course, got big legs. He's sitting up front, and he said, Howie, we need to pull over here, and I need to get in the back seat. I said, why? He said, well, if they see a black man and a white man riding together, they're going to pull us over for sure. And he got in the back and gave us directions. Elvin, you remember that?
No, I don't have too vivid a memory.
Yeah, I can remember it like it was yesterday. And our incident when we had that situation when my things were put out, I can understand why they were put out. Because at the time we were playing a game, knocking on doors, and I opened, who is it? No one's there. It went on for about 30 minutes. And then finally, I was quick to open the door. Our room was at the end of the hall, and I had spotted a black hand going out. And I can understand now what happened back then. I said, Elvin, I know it was you. I saw your black hand. And that infuriated him, and I can understand why. Because, again, here's someone accusing someone, and a black hand to him was just incited all kind of anger. And next thing I know, everything I had was out in the hall. And I can remember it like it was yesterday, and I can relate to why he felt that way. And because I accused him of something because he was black. And I think I watched the Allen Iverson show the other night that they did with Larry Brown. And I don't know if you've seen it or not, but it's fantastic. But Allen Iverson said the thing that triggered him and why he didn't get along with Larry Brown at first, because every time he pulled him out of the game, he said, come on over here and sit down. And it turned out that Allen Iverson had been in front of the judge on a couple occasions as a teenager. And the thing he remembered was the judge saying, sit down. And that triggered in him the response why he couldn't relate to Coach Brown, who was, as everybody knows, one of the greatest coaches to this day. But things that happen in your past trigger events that you have in your future. And I can tell you one thing about Elvin. He said he has no regrets. In Elvin's mind, he feels like, and he was such a competitor, he felt like he could win every game, and he was capable of winning every game. And I'm sure he would like to have won 3 or 4 national championships in the pros and college, because he had that kind of thirst for winning. And that's where the greatness came from with Elvin Hayes. Thank you.
All right, so I don't know how I'm gonna follow that. I'm not even gonna try to follow that. But I just want to ask all 3 of you guys, since you've played the game at the highest level, I want to know how you know or what you see from this current UH basketball team that's different from you guys' game and when you played. So I want to know from each one of you, what do you think like that's changed through UH basketball lately?
No, I didn't play at the highest level of basketball. That's your go, Reid.
So when I watch this team play, and I've said it repeatedly and on the air, it's not a perfect team. We struggle offensively, But so I've been calling games on ESPN for 32 years. And in 32 years of calling games, I have never, ever seen a team that can play defense the way these kids do. And the way they're connected. And what that says to me is that they buy into that. One of the things Kelvin talks about all the time is that you can accomplish great things if you don't care who gets the credit. And if you buy into being a part of something bigger than yourself. So if you've got somebody averaging 30 points per game, that can become addictive into where they're the star of the team. And these kids are not like that. They bought into being a part of something bigger than themselves. And to me, that's what I like watching. When I watch a team play, that is attractive to me. And that's I think, the best quality of this team. But from a pure basketball standpoint, I've never seen a team defend the way these kids do. They can hedge and blitz a double screen at the half court stripe. They can cover the rim. They can close out on this corner, and you swear there's 7 of them out on the floor. The way they're flying around, and that's hard to do. That takes physical toughness, and it takes mental toughness. And this is the toughest group I maybe have ever seen. Really tight.
You know, Coach was telling me this too, and well, not Coach. He didn't tell me that much. It's Kellen told me that Coach just tells me to shut up. But no, Kellen was telling me that every one of the kids on this team this year, their parents told Kelvin they were going to the U of H because they wanted him to coach them hard.
Yep, coach them hard. Tell them the truth.
Yeah. And that's why you see so many parents on those road games. They're sitting behind the bench because they wanted their kid to be coached hard. And that's why all these kids are playing that.
That's exactly right. I've known Kelvin since he was at OU, early on in the Big 12, and since '95. And you see on TV, and it always gets highlighted because it's a great story, right? He's always mad, he's always yelling, he's never happy. It doesn't matter what happens. He's always grumpy and he's screaming at somebody. And he coaches them harder than I've ever seen a man coach kids. And then they step off that court, and he loves those kids more than any coach I've ever seen love on kids. And that's why in this day of transfer portals, we've lost 2 kids. And that's it. When other schools are losing 4 and 5 and 6 every single year, he loves those kids, and it is genuine, and they would run through a wall for him.
You know, Elvin, Guy Lewis wasn't.
No.
He coached you hard too, wouldn't he?
Yeah.
Very hard. But he was, you know, like when you compare coaches that you have had, and you say, I had Dick Motta, I had Gene Shue, I had, you know, KC, but, you know, then you look and you say, you know, man, Guy was probably, out of all of those coaches that are really top coaches, but really, Guy was one of the best coaches. He was a tremendous coach.
And how much you win too. Guy Lewis had your starting 5.
Yeah.
Was George Reynolds was 6'6".
Yeah.
Don Chaney was 6'6".
Yeah.
Theodis Lee was 6'7".
Yeah.
You were 6'9", and Ken Spain was 7 feet. So when they played UCLA in the Dome, Guy says, don't beat that trap. They had the greatest defense in the world, full court. He said, we're going to throw it here. So we beat the trap every time. 1, 2, 3. Nobody ever dribbled, and then you beat Al Cinder at the other end with a jump shot. And that's exactly the way the game went. You had 29 points in the first half, never sweat.
Well, that's the way coach really wanted things to go. And that's, you know, out of all the coaches that I've had in the pros, you know, it's one of those things that, you know, I think Coach was one of the best coaches I had.
Samson, and we're very blessed.
Yes, we are.
Do you have any other remarks you want to make before we close?
No, let's just win the rest of our game.
That's right.
After win the rest, we get to it.
We mentioned Welcome Wilson earlier today, and I just want to say that we were very sad to learn about his passing just a little over a week ago. He is our namesake at the Welcome Wilson Houston History Collaborative. And in many ways, Welcome's name is synonymous with Houston history, and we will really miss him a great deal. He was a stalwart UH supporter and also a really delightful storyteller. I was never with Welcome that I didn't learn something new about Houston history that I did not know before. And so I'll really miss working with him and seeing him at events like this and that sort of thing. We're going to continue to stay true to the values that Welcome believed in when he gave his gift to the collaborative, and that is in valuing our past and sharing those stories with others. I also want to recognize our Welcome Wilson intern at the Center for Public History for the 2023-24 school year, Miranda Rosinski. Miranda worked with us in editing this issue for the city, and she is now in the graduate program in public history. And so the reason she's not here tonight is because she's actually being a very good student and she's in class. So we're very happy to recognize Miranda with that internship. At CPH and at Houston History Magazine, we rely on the generous support of people like you who believe in our priority of telling history and also in ensuring student success. So if you like the program this evening, we hope that you will go to our website, houstonhistorymagazine.org, and purchase a subscription or maybe give a gift subscription to someone. My predecessor, Joe Pratt, always used to say, you probably know somebody who's worth a $20 gift. So the magazine is great for that. And also you can go to the website and click on donate if you would like to give a gift to the Welcome Wilson Houston History Collaborative, or you can text CPH to 71777. We also have a laptop available in the back if you would like to do that while you're here. I want to also invite you to visit. We have 2 exhibits that are right outside. You can go through one of these doors and down the hallway, and you'll go down to the left. And we have 2 exhibits that are over there. One is the Agents of Change exhibit, which we featured at our last launch event, telling the stories of the first century of the University of Houston. So you walk right past that, and then you will come to another exhibit, which is for the 20th anniversary of the Houston History Magazine. We celebrated 20 years this past fall, and this magazine that we're celebrating tonight is our 50th issue. And so they are all featured over there on the wall and in the cases, as well as the 10th anniversary of the Welcome Wilson Houston History Collaborative. I also want to thank Carrie Sheward, as we said earlier, for this fabulous 3-year gift that we had to work on the 100 Years of Stories project. It really gave some fabulous opportunities to our students. 68 participants did 74 oral histories, produced 4 full and partial issues of the magazine, excuse me, and also researched for some video spots for Houston Public Media. I'm sorry. I want to thank Dean O'Connor. I want to thank Nancy Young for being here this evening, our interim director, Mark Goldberg, Dr. Wes Jackson, who is our program director, and mostly I want to thank our panelists. I got a cough again, I'm sorry. Choked on myself. I want to thank our panelists. They are the most important guests who were here this evening. Reid Gettys, Elvin Hayes, Bill Worrell. Thank you. Thanks. And I want to thank you all for coming. We do play Cincinnati tomorrow night. We're 24-3 right now. We are number 1, so go Cougs. And excuse me.